what's up guys, Lightning014 here, soaring back into everyday life with another video. In this video we're talking about this, which is the Steampunk Slingfire that I built for the Reddit competition last month. So we're going to be talking a bit about it, how I built it, and spam, if you're watching this, I'm sorry because you're about to find out just how janky of a mess this thing actually is. But that's what we're going to be talking about today in this video. So I built this blaster for the Reddit r/nerf Discord competition for June, and the theme for that was steampunk, or just really anything punk. So you could do cyberpunk or atom punk or diesel punk or steampunk or any other flavor of punk. And I learned there are a lot more flavors of punk than I thought there were. But anyways, so this is the blaster that I built, and I actually won first place with this. I won $100 for this blaster, beating out several others. I would say honestly very good entries, and so I was pretty happy with that. And Spam was the moderator who judged that contest, and so thank you very much to Spam for choosing this blaster. So anyways, enough rambling about the contest. Let's talk about this blaster. So what this is a Slingfire, if it wasn't already obvious, that I have painted up in a steampunk aesthetic and added on several cosmetic modifications. So despite winning $100 for this contest, the blaster that I built was fairly cheap. The most of the cost for this was like paint, really. I spent like probably $10-ish in paint and then $5 on materials, and the blaster already had, so that worked out pretty nicely. So let's talk about this. So the base blaster is a Slingfire, which I took apart and took out all of the internals. This is a non-functional prop. And I took out all of the internals, and I even glued the lever in place. And then I also painted up all of the parts. I used a metallic gold for the main body, and then metallic silver for everything else. Then I did a couple of bits in black as well, like this trigger. I did that in black with acrylic paints. So, but the cool parts about this blaster is not really the shell, or it's not really the blaster itself and the paint job, it's the cosmetic add-ons that I did to this. So you can see right up here, I have I drilled holes in it in the jam door, and then I attached these light bulbs, so I think they look rather nice. These I also got at Goodwill. And then right here, I drilled holes in the shell and stuck in this hose. And this hose is also from Goodwill, and this is actually the straw from a drinking cup, like the kind you would get at like a ball game or like a baseball game or like a circus, the kind of big plastic drink things that they sell you for $5, and then you go home and throw in a bin and then never look at it again, and then ends up at Goodwill, and then I use it. So yeah, and then the other cool stuff that is on here is I have attached these gauges. And Spam said I did a meteorology theme, which I thought was hilarious. That's not really a meteorology theme. What I did was I took apart an old clock, a really old clock. It was really neat, the internal mechanisms inside it. But I took apart an old clock, and that happened to have a kind of a weather gauge and then like a pressure gauge on it. So I took those out. I scoured Goodwill Outlet for like 2 trips. Went through all the bins until I finally found something that had gauges on it that I could repurpose. And then the handle here is leather wrapped, and this is actually leather from an old boot that I also found at Goodwill. And that turned out rather nice, actually. I just kind of cut up the boot and sharpied in the places where it was kind of peeling apart and showing. And then I also put in these brass kind of pseudo rivets, but really they're the, I don't really know what the name for them is, but you stick them into papers, and then they have little legs that splay out on the inside, and then you use those to kind of hold paper together and sort of make things that can rotate. I've used them for craft projects, but I don't know what the actual technical name is for that. And then where this blaster gets interesting is that this blaster does not actually have any cosmetic greebles on the other side. And this is where you're starting to learn just how janky this blaster is. This blaster looks nice from the other side, but this side just really doesn't look as nice because I didn't add anything. And I even ran out of time to sand off the warning labels. Not sure if that's going to show up on camera. But yeah, it's still got all the warning labels and crap on it. So that doesn't look great either. So that's why all the pictures showed the nice side. And then the stock is where it gets interesting, because the part that I that I took out of the clock was this giant gauge, and it actually had a really cool internal mechanism on it that had like a, I'm not sure how to describe it, but I'll put the video up on screen right now and you can watch it. But it was really neat. It had like it had kind of a lever that went back and forth attached to a string that was attached to a metal coil that wound up, and it looks really cool because the coil would kind of go from being a almost sphere shape to basically a flat disc within a second. It was really cool. But anyways, so what I did for that was I actually cut holes in the stock to try and put the whole mechanism in so that I could potentially take it out and then look at it later, just because I thought the mechanism was cool. But that didn't go so well. I'll show the pictures of how that went on the screen right now. But that didn't go so well. I made my hole, I measured the dimensions of the object with calipers and marked out my hole accordingly, but I somehow still did it wrong. I know my measurements were correct, but somehow the thing was bigger than I thought it was going to be, or it was smaller than I thought it was going to be, so my hole ended up way too big. So that's where this wrapped piece around the stock comes in. You can see it's not just the flat wood texture like it should be. It's got this kind of metalish looking wrap. And the reason for that is that because of that hole, the hole kind of just screwed everything up, and that was a mess. So I was like, I gotta fix this somehow. So what I did was I actually cut up the cover from a plastic, cover from a notebook, and I cut that to shape, and then I wrapped it around there and secured it with hot glue. And you're going to learn this blaster is incredibly janky because everything on here is secured with hot glue. And when I say everything, I mean everything. The lever is glued in with hot glue. These things I didn't even glue in with hot glue. I just twisted them into the holes that I had drilled. This stock wrap that's made from the plastic binder, that's also hot glued. These gauges are hot glued on, and I even hot glued the glass covers for the gauges to the gauges with more hot glue. Not sure if that's going to show up, but right there we've got a little kind of stripe of hot glue, and that's the same way for this one here on the stock as well. And so yes, that's kind of where it starts getting janky. And then this brass pipe is the final cosmetic add-on that I did, and that was I thought that turned out really good. But what this is a copper pipe that I actually soldered as part of my plumbing merit badge a long time ago, many years ago. And then that worked out perfectly for this. I just kept it around kind of for the memories, I guess, kind of because I just didn't want to throw it away, and I thought it might be useful someday, and turns out it was useful. Hooray! So that's where this thing came from. It's literally just a copper pipe that's had another section of copper pipe soldered onto it, and then it also had a T section soldered onto the other end in here, and that I cut down with my Dremel to make it fit, and then I literally just friction fit shoved it in here. So yeah, the blaster looks good from a distance, but up close you can see it's really not as nice as you would think. For example, you can see another way that this blaster is janky is that the paints I used are not designed for working with plastic. I went to the hardware store and was like, okay, I'm gonna find some metallic paint. They've probably got 1-2 colors at the most, and boy was I wrong. I found out that Ace Hardware, at least my Ace Hardware, carries an absurd number of metallic paints. Everything from polished bronze to mirror bronze to mirror gold to polished gold, chrome, silver, and then add like another 10-15 colors on top of that. So that was interesting. So I finally found the colors that I wanted, and I went with the most shiny ones that I could find, just because I didn't want it to be too dull, and I knew I could always just dry brush it down and make it more weathered and darker later. So the paints that I use for this are not actually meant to adhere to plastic, and because of that they're already starting to come off in places. I actually had to touch up several components right before I took the picture, because although there was only like 2 days between when I painted it and then when I took the pictures, paint had already started to come off. You can see right here on like this piece, the clear kind of gray plastic is already starting to show through. That's the same way for like parts of the stock. When I tried to, when I wrapped this, I think at one point I tried to, what did I do? I tried like sanding it or rubbing it or adding dry brushing, and then adding the black paint and rubbing it on there, it actually removed some of the silver chrome spray paint, so I had to go through and re-spray paint that. So yeah, and then you can also see it's coming off in areas like here up at the front muzzle, and yeah, you can see the black is showing through on like here, which honestly isn't the worst thing because black just kind of looks like dirt. So that's that. Other things that I painted, one other thing that I did, I also went through and I did some detailing with acrylic paints. I did some black detailing. I did mostly just like little bits on the shell. I did like here, these little kind of fake screw holes, and then I mirrored that on the other side because I do have standards. And so I did those there, and there, and then that. So yeah, so that I think that really, because the way it was, I really wasn't happy with it. I think adding that little bit of dark color on areas that were just flat gold really helped a lot with the overall look of it. And then, before I did the acrylic painting, but oh well. Before I did that, I went and I kind of pseudo dry brushed because I don't really know how to dry brush. I don't know what I'm doing at all. So I just kind of rubbed on black paint and smeared it around until I thought it looked semi-okay. And you can kind of see that, at least in the close-up photos, you can see that there's kind of dirt streaks and grime on it, which is really just the black paint that I haphazardly slapped on and then kind of rubbed off, which I think is kind of how you're supposed to do dry brushing. I don't know. I looked at like 2 tutorials, and then the entire time while I was doing it, I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. This does not seem like it is working very well. So yeah, so that's why some areas of it are like this front muzzle is clearly way more shiny than like, or is clearly way less shiny than like this stock part, which I had to go back and re-spray paint later. So yeah, but overall, I'm pretty happy with how it looks. Despite being a janky mess held together with hot glue and with paint that isn't even meant for plastic and that's already scraping off in places, and just cosmetic add-ons that are held in by friction fit and nothing else. I mean, for being a jank build that I did in like a week and that's it, I'm pretty happy with it. It looks good, at least from a distance. Up close, you start to notice the imperfections and that sort of thing. You start kind of realizing, yeah, this thing isn't really as pretty as you thought it was, but from a distance it looks really good, and I'm very happy with that, at least. Like I think I mentioned earlier, but this blaster is non-functional. It's completely cosmetic. It's going to hang on a wall, and I'm never going to bring this to a game or outside in public, really, just because there's no orange tip. And that's obviously, I'm sure most of you already know this, but the orange tip is not the thing you should go by for whether or not you should bring something out in public or to a Nerf battle. What you really should be going by is how realistic it looks, and this being all metallic colors, and despite, I mean, up close you can clearly tell it's some sort of steampunk thing, but from a distance to some old lady who's never seen a real firearm in her life and just sees, ah, that kid's got a gun, then you get the cops called on you and you potentially get shot, because this is America and the cops do that. But yeah, so obviously, say just kind of a prop wall hanger piece. Once I eventually get a peg forward, this will definitely have a spot on it. Non-functional, like I said, I took out all the internals. This lever is glued in place, doesn't move. Trigger does move, but that's just because I didn't glue it in place. But yeah, that's pretty much the blaster. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it. Pretty happy that it looks good. I'm really thrilled that I won first place. I'll throw up some of the other entries on the screen, right? I'll throw up a slideshow when I'm done talking here, so you can see some of the other entries and get a look for what other people submitted. I am guaranteeing you that none of those were as jankily built as this thing is, so I feel slightly bad about that. I almost feel like I kind of cheated a little bit just because of how jank it is on the surface and how it really looks good in pictures but doesn't look as good in person, so I feel kind of bad about that. And also how I only took pictures of this one side that looks good, and then this other side with all the warning labels and no cosmetic greebles. Now that doesn't look as good, and I didn't take pictures of that. I feel sort of deceitful about doing that, but pretty happy. And big thank you again to Spam for choosing my entry for first place and giving me a $100 gift card to Out of Darts. So it's pretty great. I will definitely be spending that money sometime in the near future. Haven't quite decided what I'm going to get yet. But yeah, that's pretty much the video, and that's pretty much the blaster. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, I leave them in the comment section down below. If you think you could, if you want to say how bad it is and how you know you can do better, then feel free to tell me that too. You won't hurt my feelings. I know this is a janky mess. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye. Cue the slideshow.